Thank you, Eileen. Thank you, Colorado Gerontological Society, for having me. I really appreciate the time and the opportunity. For me, this situation that we are experiencing is very near and dear to my heart. I work with victims every day who have unfortunately been victimized by scammers. Some have lost some money, some have lost significant amounts of money. Unfortunately, by the time that I get to them, they've already been a victim. And so for me, I would love to get this information out to prevent people from becoming victims. So you won't hear a lot about current scams. I will talk about some of the current scams, but what I want to talk about is why scams are successful. That is the goal for me and for this program, because the problem is that if I teach you about a scam today, I can tell you by next week there will be a completely different scam going on. So if I teach you the tricks and what to look for and the classic signs and what you're experiencing, you'll be able to prevent that from happening. So let's talk about why scams are successful. The reason being is that we are incredibly accessible. We have preached to our older adults that scams are targeting you. And yes, that is true. But prior to the most recent years, that was because older adults are typically accessible, typically home, typically answering those landlines. Now all of us are accessible. We all have cell phones. And I want everybody to understand this has nothing to do with age. That is not the reason that scams are successful. It has nothing to do with your capacity or your cognition or your intelligence. It has everything to do with how good these criminals are. The internet has given them a toolbox, a very big toolbox that allows them to prove to you who they're saying they are, even though it's not true. And I need everybody to hear that. They have the toolbox to prove to you who they're saying they are, even though it's a lie. So don't ask for proof. Don't assume that what you're seeing is real. These stories that they tell, they're going to sound plausible. They may make sense at the time for something that you might be dealing with. The scams are sophisticated and they are constantly changing. We are no longer dealing with the Nigerian prince who wants to send us $1 million, okay? These are very sophisticated scams. And with the technology that they have, they're gonna make things look incredibly real. Also understand we have a lot going on in our lives. And we may be dealing with a loss, we may be dealing with a new diagnosis, we may be sick. There are a lot of reasons why this worked for us. When the scammers are working so hard, they are really working hard to build trust with you. They are trying to establish a friendship, maybe even a romance. And let me tell you, scammers are better at customer service than customer service agents, okay? They are kind, they are patient, they are going to sell you the moon. Sometimes it's the opposite. Sometimes they're going to put you in a state of heightened emotion and they're going to be the saviors. They're going to come and help you work through this problem, okay? What I want people to get from this training today is I want people to understand that they trigger the emotional part of our brain. That is always the goal. When our emotional center gets triggered, our prefrontal cortex, which is our critical thought process, slows down. And if you don't believe me, think of a time when you were incredibly angry or very upset. And at that moment, you said, I've got to get this out. And you said or did something that you maybe weren't too proud of later and said, oh my goodness, that wasn't so great. That's because our emotional brain was thinking for us. And when that happens, our critical thought process goes, oh, that you've got it. I'm going to slow down over here. And if you've ever been a victim of a crime, you know that you might have felt that you were in a state of fog. You may feel like you were hypnotized. You might feel like you don't remember things so clearly. And that's why. When they promise joy and elation, they're promising something that makes you feel good. That releases serotonin and dopamine. Those are where our romance scams come from. our investment scams, our publishers clearinghouse scams, but sometimes they can be something as simple as getting a text from Xfinity saying we can reduce your bill by 50%, only it's not Xfinity. You click on the link and you go down the rabbit hole of attaching your bank account for automatic bill payment, and you've just connected your money with a scammer. So they don't have to be these big grand demeanors. It can be something that simple. We saw a lot of people getting scammed more than once. And people say, well, how could people do that? There's so many reasons. One of the scams that was happening is somebody might get scammed and lose a significant amount of money. You file a report with your local police department and they tell you there's nothing we can do, and you're frustrated and you're upset. And then magically you get a call from the FBI or the Federal Trade Commission who's going to help you find those funds and track down those scammers. But guess what? There's a fee involved because it's not the FBI and it's not the Federal Trade Commission. It's another scammer. Scammers keep lists. They keep lists with our information. With all the hacking that's going on, we have to assume our information is out there. And I know that's scary, but it is what we have right now. And it's unfortunate. We have to assume that every conversation we have with the scammer, every email we respond to, every text we respond to, they're gathering more data. If you're on social media and your social media is not private, they are gathering more data. So you may not fall for one scam, but the more they get to know you, they're going to figure out what scam works for you. And that's why you've got to recognize these things. Scammers are going to trigger your emotional brain one of two ways: by bringing that excitement and joy, meaning invest in this opportunity. You've won Publishers Clearinghouse. Here's a new budding relationship, somebody that loves you so deeply that you've never met. And by the second way is by causing alarm, by stressing us out, by being some entity that says, hey, there's this problem, hurry up and figure it out now. On that joy and elation side, what I want you to understand is if it sounds too good to be true, it is, period, end of story. There's no, it might be true, it's likely true. 8 years ago, that might have been the case. But I can tell you since COVID, since 2020, the scams have ramped up. And because there is no justice, they are not getting caught, they are not getting put in prison, they are not going away, it's multiplied. So not only the amount of scams that are happening has multiplied, but the amount of money being lost is happening. I want everybody to understand that last year, young people were scammed more often than older adults. The problem is older adults lose more money. If I'm 23 and I lose $300, I have time. I have the ability to make up that money. I can get a second job. But if I'm 84 and I lose $30,000, how am I going to recoup those funds? That's why this is so important. And that's why I'm so passionate about making sure that this information gets out. On that joy and elation side, I want people to be critical. Again, 8 years ago, we could get on the internet and look something up and go for it. It was fairly safe. Now that is not the case. They are creating fake websites, fake numbers that lead to things that make you think you're talking to the right place. So what you're going to hear me say repeatedly today is find the safe, valid source. And I'll explain what that means here shortly. I also want people to understand that they've got to slow down and do their research. So when you get that new friendship that came through text or Facebook or Instagram, or you started dating somebody from an app and you haven't met them, if it sounds too good to be true, it is. And remember, you're not suddenly getting a payday. Nobody's giving out free money. If you've ever been to Blackhawk and seen all the brand new casinos, you know that Blackhawk is not losing money, even though people win gambling every day. Nobody is getting free money. Especially if you've never even bought a lottery ticket, you certainly didn't win a lottery, okay? I'm going to briefly talk about romance scams just because this has been big and heavy. We're seeing a lot more of this on a lot of celebrity imposter scams. And so what I want people to understand is some of those tricks that are red flags that you're going to look for is this person is always going to have some hardship. They're going to show you possibly a bank account or some legal paperwork that says they're getting an inheritance. They just need help paying taxes, or they're going to show you a ledger that looks legit, or have you log on to an app, a Bitcoin app or cryptocurrency app, and tell you they're making all this money. All of those things are ways to keep you on the hook. They're going to start asking for more and more money, or asking you to put more and more money into those investments, and you will never see that person. They will always have an excuse. You will never meet them. They may also move you to other types of communication apps like Telegraph, WhatsApp. They're hoping that you'll talk to them on an app that's encrypted so that they can't not be detected. They're going to make up these stories that are so heartfelt, and you're going to want to help. They're asking for medical bill payments for their children or for themselves, travel expenses. The stories go on and on, but the base is always the same. They're going to start asking you for things and they will never, ever meet you in person. Remember that the scammers are going to try to establish that bond very quickly. They're going to find out things that you enjoy and things about you, and they're going to curtail every conversation to that to make sure that you know that they're invested in you. And if they're not asking you for money, don't worry, it's coming. They tend to have 10 to 15 people on the hook. While they're building that relationship with you, they've already got somebody that's been giving them money. So they're being taken care of. Now that you're giving money, they're building relationships with other victims. And it just kind of is a circular thing, okay? I want you to remember that the romance, if it happened quickly and you have never met, if you've never been able to shake this person's hand or give them a hug, you should not be dating them or being friends with them or looking to them for investment opportunities. That's the joy and elation side. This side is the problem stress side. I'm going to use an example. It's the Xcel Energy scam that we see occasionally. What I want people to understand that is if any business or government agency, I don't care if it's somebody you work with, if it's a company you know, if it's your own bank, any business, any government agency contacts you and tells you that there is a problem, your goal is to stop communicating immediately and go to that safe, valid source. So what do I mean by that? You get a phone call and you look at your phone and it says Xcel Energy. You answer it and they say, you have not been paying your bill. We haven't received a payment from you for 3 months. We are going to shut off your electricity. That is a business presenting a problem. That is when you hang up the phone and you find that safe, valid number to Xcel Energy. You don't call the number back that came to you. You don't call a number that came through an email, and you certainly don't call a number from a text message. Find the number yourself. We have to start slowing down and doing research again on our own and not trusting what's coming to us. When you call Xcel Energy, more than likely they're going to tell you that it wasn't them and that your account is fine. So that's your first red flag, disconnecting that conversation. Do not try to figure out what's going on. Do not try to investigate. Do not try to ask more questions. Just stop talking and go to that safe, valid source. The second red flag, a sense of urgency. Hurry up and do it now. The reason that they do that is because you're releasing cortisol and adrenaline. We're getting ready for fight or flight. We're stressed out. When somebody's talking about our money or our accounts, we get very stressed and we want to fix the problem immediately. And that's what they're counting on because the prefrontal cortex isn't working, right? We're thinking emotionally at this point. They're going to tell you that there's a worse problem that's going to happen. And in the Xcel Energy case, we've heard them say they'll be at your house in 20 minutes and nobody wants their electricity shut off. So you're going to do whatever you need to do. So hopefully that second red flag will indicate to you, excuse me, that is that sense of urgency will indicate to you to stop communicating and go to that safe, valid source. Okay. The only way to counteract that adrenaline dump is to do physical exercise. And we're not going to do that in the middle of a crisis or middle of a situation where money's involved, but we can breathe. And I want people to remember that. Nothing is an emergency unless your house is on fire or it's your health. We need to slow down and we need to think things through. And when we're breathing, we need to exhale longer than we inhale. And what that does will slow down that adrenaline dump and re-engage that critical thought process. And if you're still too flustered, talk to somebody, call somebody. I have some resources at the end of this. Make sure that you know who you can call, who you can trust when things are kind of obscure or confusing, okay? The third red flag in that scenario is they will isolate you and coach you. Any business that is isolating or telling you to lie is a scammer, okay? Nobody's going to tell you to lie to the banker. If they're telling you to go to the bank, withdraw money, and tell the banker that you are redoing your kitchen or rebuild, or if they go to the store to buy gift cards and they're telling you to lie to the cashier and say it's for your grandchildren, no legitimate business or government agency is going to ask you to lie. That is the last red flag where you go, hey, wait a minute, this isn't right. The isolation piece comes when they tell you, don't tell anybody, don't talk to your spouse, don't talk to the children. They may try to make you think that the source is in on it by saying, oh, don't call your bank. Somebody there is in on it. You know, somebody there is the fraudster. They're going to make you think that that source is not available. And that is just not true. You always go to that safe, valid source. A key thing that I want to bring up here is just because your caller ID said it was Xcel Energy, we don't trust our caller ID. Unfortunately, every single one of us has the ability to download what is called a spoofing app. It is in your Play Store, whichever type of cell phone you have. We can also download voice changers, okay? We can change our accent. I can sound like a male. I can put in my phone that I'm contacting you, and when it rings on your side of the table, I can put in there that it says Internal Revenue Service. So you look at your caller ID and you go, the IRS is calling me, and you answer it, and I say, hey, you didn't pay the right amount of money in taxes last year. That's where that adrenaline starts happening, that cortisol, and you're thinking, I can't, how do you prove them wrong? And it looks very official. What I want you to trust instead is your gut. We all have a gut instinct and we all know when something doesn't feel right. And that's what I want people to start doing. This problem with scammers is so pervasive and is everywhere. And if something doesn't feel right, stop what you're doing, take those deep breaths, contact somebody, start over. And when I say that, I'm going to give you an example that happened to me. I have a card that's a debit card and it was declined. I stepped out of the office and I called the number on the back, and the gentleman said, how can I help you? And I said, my card was declined. Can you tell me what's going on? He said, was it a Visa or MasterCard? And that gave me pause because I said, something doesn't seem right. They're not the same company. But at the same time, I called him and it was the number on the back of the card. So I said, it's a Visa card. And he said, okay, what's the account number? And I knew something was really wrong and I hung up. And when I checked the number that I dialed and I had put my glasses on for clarification, I had misdialed by one number. They will take numbers that are similar to official numbers, hoping that you will misdial. They will create websites that are similar to real websites, hoping that you're not paying attention. We have gotten so used to doing things so quickly in this technological world that now we've got to slow back down. I can remember a time when I used to get in the car with my mom and we would actually drive to go pay bills, right? We went to the water company, the electric company, we actually paid the bills. And now all we have to do is click a button. And that's okay. If you know that you are on the right website, did you do your research? Were you thorough? Okay. One of the things that I have tried to get across to people will always say, don't click a link from somebody you don't know. Don't click a link from people you do know. Make sure that you go to that source. If it's your cousin, brother, did you mean to send me this link? You just call them and say, did you mean to send me this link? Just to be sure, because we don't know if our friends or families' email accounts, Facebook accounts have been hacked. If they've been hacked, you're going to get something from your friend or family. So just because you know them doesn't mean it's safe either. Okay. Talk to them. Did you mean to send me this? Oh, yeah, cousin, those are the pictures from the reunion. Great. And if they say, what are you talking about? Then you know that there's a problem. Okay. We aren't going to call those wonderful customer service numbers that come through our emails. I always get the one that says from US Bank that says, due to fraudulent activity, we have frozen your debit card. But if you have any questions, please give us a call. And we all know how hard it is to find an actual customer service number for all these major companies, and how nice they are to just give us that number and make it so easy and accessible. And when you dial that number, they will say, thank you for calling US Bank Fraud Department, but it's not them. So just because they answer that way, just because that number was handed to you, does not mean those are the safe, valid sources. You do the research to those sources. Make sure that we're not calling the numbers back that they call us from just to see how they answer. And we are going to double check all those numbers and make sure we're dialing the right ones. These are just some quick points, making sure that we don't call the scammer back. We don't also want to mess with the scammers. People like to do that. They're not afraid of you. They're not afraid of our government. They are hiding. They are in multiple countries. Doing that is just going to put more of a target on your back. And I discussed earlier those lists that they do. When they think they're done trying to scam you or get what they can from you, they're going to sell those lists to other scam groups. So you may see a lull in your emails or scam calls, and then it picks back up again. And that could be what it is. Don't ever take part in free trial offers without doing the research. And if somebody contacts you saying that they're delivering medical devices, make sure that if you haven't had that conversation with your doctor, that you're not accepting that, because the bill will come. Okay. Also, another trick that the scammers will do is if they tell you that you're investing money, what they'll do is either create a fake ledger or a fake app that makes it look like you're depositing money, and you'll see the balance and you'll see it grow. Either that whole app is fake, the ledger is fake, or the account is real, but you'll never have access to that account. You're just making more money for the scammer. And if you start to doubt them, what they might do is send you a check. And if they send you a check, a couple of different things could happen. One, there is no money behind the check, but you deposit the check and you go and spend the money. And then the bank contacts you 2 weeks later and says, hey, that $5,000 that you withdrew, there was no money behind that check. And now you owe the bank $5,000. You are overdrawn. The other thing that they will do is scam somebody in another state, say California, and they convince that victim to send you the check, and they'll ask you to keep a portion of it and then to send that money back on to them. And what you're actually doing is laundering the money for them. So you could be considered a criminal. But that's one way that they try to establish that trust of, look, I'm sending you money. See, I'm legitimate. See, this is real. And none of it is. Okay, so never deposit a check that you don't know where it came from, that you know that you didn't earn that money. Okay. And again, when I say they have the technology to fake to you who they are, they do. I have seen some incredible letters from banks that have the bank logo, the CEO's picture at the bottom. I've seen some pretty amazing Publishers Clearinghouse letters. So asking for proof isn't going to help you spot the scam. I also want to make people aware that a lot of people look for misspellings and grammar, and that is great, because that does indicate that it is a scam. However, AI is here, so that's going to change. That's why instead of focusing on those things that are going to improve for the scammer, I want you to focus on what's happening to you. And have you done your research? And have you spoken to somebody that you trust? So when I talked about spoofing phone calls, what they can do is download an app on their phone, punch in a number, and that's the number that's going to come up on your caller ID. Okay. Now, what they can also do is what's called VoIP phone calls. It's voice over internet protocol. And that's the internet just drumming up numbers for them. They're just random numbers that are coming up on your caller ID. Yes, I still want people to block those numbers. I still want people to report those numbers, whatever your phone options are. That is still something that I want people to do. In terms of some of the romance scams, excuse me, friendship scams, I hope people understand how easy it is to fake those accounts. When we're looking at making friends or dating apps and we meet somebody that says they're interested in us, just because they have an account and just because they can show pictures of what they're doing daily does not mean that's who is behind that picture. If you go into any public account, all you have to do is take a picture of the pictures and you now own those pictures. I can either steal the name of that person and create an account, or I can make my own name, but with these beautiful pictures of hunky guys or beautiful women and say that that's who I am. And as long as I'm friends with other people, you don't realize that I'm not who that person is. It is incredibly easy. You can have multiple Facebook accounts, multiple Instagram accounts, TikTok, all of them. Okay. They don't monitor that. If you are on social media, please make your social media private. That is one way that they are gathering so much information. And if you are friends with people on social media, once again, that you have never shaken their hand or been able to give them a hug, you have no business being friends with them. The social media is a cesspool for scammers. It is their easiest place to target people. Okay. If you need help with some of that technology information, my information will be at the end of this. Please feel free to call me. Voice cloning, another thing that comes up frequently. We're seeing a lot more cases with that, especially in the family emergency plan scams. What happens is that they will take a snippet of somebody's voice. So again, if your grandchildren or nieces and nephews are on social media, YouTube, Instagram, and they're talking in a video, the technology out there allows them to take that snippet of voice and they can create a conversation with you over the phone. They can also take a still picture of that beautiful bikini model and video chat you. That's the technology that we have now. Those cases are going to start increasing. So when I say they have the ability to prove to you who they are, doesn't mean it's not a lie. Okay. With that voice cloning, I want to go back to expressing that I understand what I'm asking people to do as a challenge. If I get a phone call and my daughter's name comes up on the caller ID and it's her voice saying that she needs help, I have to have the courage to hang up and call my daughter. That is stopping the communication and going to that valid source. That's what I mean by that. And that is hard to do, but it is so important. And if you can't get a hold of the person who they're claiming to be, find their parents. If they're pretending to be your grandchild, find their parents, find the brother, the sister, to make sure that you know that in fact they're at their job and they just can't answer the phone. Sometimes families will often also do passwords. That can be something as minimal as, for me and my kids, we came up when they were little, chocolate cake. It was easy for them to remember. It was their favorite dessert. It's something that you can just remember and have everybody in the family remember, so that when they are saying it's them and you're too terrified to hang up that phone because you're not sure, ask them for their password. And if they don't have it, then you can safely hang up and get a hold of the family member that's pretending to call you. I have to have people do it with Denver Police Department all the time, especially because once they've been scammed, if they've spoken to the scammer again and said the police were here, they will call back pretending to be the police. And I tell them, as scary as it is, you hang up on the police and then you call the non-emergency number or call me and we will figure out what is going on together. So those are the tricks. Those are the things that they do. And so that's again, when we hear about scams and we think, well, how can people fall for that? That's not fair. This is a crime that happened to somebody. And we weren't in that heightened state of emotion at the time that this person was experiencing that. Okay, so be kind and be thoughtful to those who may express that, because you might learn something from them and prevent it from happening to you. Okay. These are just some of the technology tricks. So I've gone over these already. Not to believe your caller ID, don't prepay for services, don't pay for anything that you didn't offer. One of the things that I want to talk about is we will never get rid of the scammers contacting us, but we can lessen the contact that they have with us. And this is kind of a silly analogy, but I ask that you bear with me because it works. I want you to think about fishing. When we go fishing, we throw our line out into the lake and we wait and we're hopeful and nothing happens and we don't even get a bite. So we pack up our stuff when we go home, but we say, well, I'm no quitter. And I know that fish tend to bite first thing in the morning. So you get up and you go out first thing in the morning, bright and early, you throw your line in and you get a bite. That's exciting. And you know that you have to pay attention to your line, but then you still don't catch anything. So you pull your line out and you change your bait, throw your line in and you wait, nothing. Pull your line out, change your bait, throw your line in, and goodness, you've caught a fish. That's exciting. You're not going to leave after one fish. You're going to stay and get your fill. Every time you give money to a scammer, that's them catching a fish. They're not done after one fish. People will tell me, well, they're not going to call me anymore because they know I don't have any more money. No, they're not done with you. They're either going to try to get you to take out credit cards, loans, or become a money mule for them so that they can launder money through you by sending those other scam checks or fake checks to you. They're not done. You have to stop communicating with them entirely for it to stop. Think now, the reason you stayed and stuck it out was because you had a bite. That was an indication that there were fish in there. Every time you answer the phone and it's not somebody that you know, you're biting the hook. Every time you click on a link, you're biting the hook. Every time you opt out to a text message that was not a legitimate source, you're biting the hook. You're telling the scammer, I am a live person that is attached to this phone number and attached to this email. As long as you keep trying, you might figure out which scam is going to work. That's changing the bait. If you had gone back to the lake the next morning and didn't catch anything, you never got a bite, you would likely never fish there again because it wasn't fruitful. And that's what you have to become to these guys, not fruitful. So if you know that your bank is legitimately texting you and you want to opt out, you can safely opt out. But what I would encourage you to do instead is block the number. Because if it's a scammer pretending to be your bank, you're telling them, I'm here. You've got to figure out what is going to get me. Okay. So that goes for email as well. If you're getting scam attempts through emails, please send it to junk mail or spam or block. Everybody's email provider offers a different name for it, but it all does the same thing. It tells the email provider, hey, I don't want this email from this address. And your email provider will make sure that those go into your spam or junk folder without you ever seeing them. It also helps to prevent us from clicking accidentally on links that we don't want to. If you've clicked on a link accidentally, please have your computer or phone looked at to make sure that you didn't allow access for scammers to just be observing what's going on and learning passwords and seeing who you bank with and those things. Just because you clicked on a link and your computer didn't explode doesn't mean that you didn't give access to somebody who has really bad intentions, okay? In regards to email, I know everybody gets these, and a lot of them look very official. Unfortunately, somebody that's been scammed may purchase Norton LifeLock. Nothing against Norton LifeLock, but it's expensive and they purchase it. And I believe it's a year subscription. And then scammers see that, and then they pretend to be Norton LifeLock, and they pretend to charge them again, which then they say, if you have questions, call this wonderful customer service number. And the person does, and they answer Norton LifeLock, and they say, why did you charge me again? I've already paid for the year. And they say, oh, not a problem, sir. We're going to take care of that for you. And you go down the rabbit hole of getting scammed again. So any of those urgent emails, we've been trying to reach you, you'll see like exclamation points, urgent. If you know it doesn't apply to you, please block it, send it to spam or junk mail. And also, if you think that it might be you, do your research. Check the address that it came from. If it's like Jim at Gmail or PayPal at Gmail, that's not an official email address. That came from a crook, okay? The other thing that has been happening is they will, as you see on my screen here, I have johnwayne9 at Gmail and johnwayne9 at Yahoo. I had a victim get emailed from a friend and asked her for some help in purchasing gift cards because the friend was in the hospital. And when we see an email from somebody who's a friend of ours, we don't pay attention to the actual email provider. We just see JohnWayne9 and say, oh, that's my buddy. I got to see what's going on with her. And we get into that email and we have a dialogue. Well, what they did is they must have had access to one or both of the person's emails. And what they did is recreated the email, but from a different company. So the original email address was at Gmail, and they created a fake email at Yahoo. And the victim didn't realize that because she didn't pay attention to that. She saw JohnWayne9, and because her friend was in the hospital, she wanted to help out. Sent the gift cards, and it was never the friend. So we need to pay attention to those email addresses and those providers. But again, if you call the friend and that's going to that safe, valid source and say, hey, just to clarify, how much were you thinking? And the friend can say, I don't know what you're talking about because it was never the friend. Or, hey, thank you for helping. This is what's going on, which is unlikely that that was the case. Some of these I'm just going through because I've already addressed them. But this is one scam that I want to make sure. There's two scams that I will bring up right now. One is the IT support scam, and this is one where your computer will either start flashing, or a pop-up will come up, or it will make noise and a pop-up, and it will say your computer's been hacked, or we detected activity on this account, and then it'll say, please do not shut off. Well, please do shut off. That's exactly what you should do, is shut off your computer. And by shutting off, I don't mean closing the lid. I mean completely powering down and unplugging it from the wall and unplugging it from Wi-Fi. When you get back in, it should go away. If it does not, then you need to have your computer professionally looked at and get it scrubbed to make sure there's nothing nefarious in there. I hope that everybody has antivirus on their computers and their iPads, things like that. But just understand that those don't catch everything. So if you keep getting that pop-up, please have your computer looked at. But once again, that's the stress that creates that, oh my gosh, what's happening? And then they're going to so conveniently give you a 1-800 number to call for help. And it's not going to be anybody good. And then if you give them access to your computer, they can download all sorts of things, spyware, things like that. So again, that's one that I like to talk about because it doesn't come from a phone call or a text. It comes from, it's kind of alarming when you're on the computer. Same thing with your phone. You can take it to one of your providers and have them to take a look at it. Just say, just want to make sure everything looks clean. They may have to do a factory reset. So save all the things that you want to save before you have them do that. The other one that I'll talk about before I go into this is we talked about, some of those imposter scams where they pretend to be somebody that they're not. That's the majority of the scams. But one of the big ones that's happening right now is very common due to how we operate already. Meaning sometimes with our credit cards or our bank accounts, we legitimately get texts and phone calls from our banks and our credit card companies when there's suspicion of fraud. And there again, I have to remind you that as long as you stop communicating with whatever however that communication came through, and go to that valid safe source, you will be safe. What we've seen is that they're texting, pretending to be from your bank or your credit card company, saying, did you send this $500 wire yesterday? Or did you make this $400 purchase yesterday? And you text them back, no. They'll say, okay, we're going to have somebody from our fraud department call you. And then they're going to call you and say, hey, this is, Zing Credit Union fraud department, and we understand you didn't make this purchase. Not a problem. We're going to help you with that. That's not your bank. If your bank legitimately calls you and you hang up on them, it's okay. You can call them and apologize later. Just make sure you're talking to your bank. I would rather have you be a little embarrassed about being rude than lose any money or have to pick up the pieces after being scammed. Being scammed is incredibly traumatic. It's as invasive as if your car or your home was broken into and you're left picking up the pieces and putting them back together. And it's a very, very scary feeling. And there's a lot of emotions that go with it. So, be kind to yourself, be kind to others, and just remember that, this is not something that only certain people are a victim of. Anybody can be a victim. Prior to last year, men between the ages of 28 and 32 were our highest number of victims because they go for the investment scams. And last year, like I said, young people were scammed more than our older adults. So understand it has nothing to do with, your cognition or not being smart. And by saying that, please understand these next words. We're never going to outsmart them. Okay. I need everybody to understand that. It has nothing to indicate you're not intelligent, but we don't have a criminal mind. We don't sit here day after day, hour after hour, coming up with ways to trick people and coming up with ways to steal, because that's what they're doing. They're stealing from us. And so we are never going to be able to outsmart that type of mentality because we don't have that. So keep that in mind. Just make yourself unfruitful, make yourself not exciting to them. Okay. If you feel that you would like to protect yourself and are concerned about possible identity theft, because either you have participated in a scam or a victim of a scam, or you feel like you may have given away more information than you should have, please consider doing a fraud alert or a credit freeze. A fraud alert requires the credit companies to do extra research to make sure you are who you're saying that you are. So that I couldn't come up and say that I'm Eileen and I need a car loan for a new hot rod. So I have to be able to prove that I am Eileen. Okay. And if I can't do that, then they're not going to let me do that. That is really easy. It's the easier option of the two. It's also not as secure. If you want to do a fraud alert, you just have to contact one of the three companies, Experian, Equifax, or TransUnion, and they will do it for all three. If you want to do something a little bit stricter, you want to look at doing a credit freeze. The credit freeze is harder in terms of you have to contact all three companies. One will not do it for the others. Both of these options are free. They are good for 1 year, so you will have to remember to do it. The easiest way to do it is to set up an account online, which I know is scary for people. This is why I put the legitimate websites on here. But when you do that, then you can easily go in and unfreeze it and refreeze it as you need. But they do need your social security number, and that is how they identify you, which makes people a little bit leery. But it is a free option as opposed to purchasing LifeLock and other things that are costly. And then getting your credit report to check that every so often is helpful. I have the numbers to all three companies. Please understand that it does not affect your current credit. It does not affect your credit cards, doesn't limit your credit cards. All it does is that you cannot go into Macy's and get the extra 40% off and open up a new credit card. You would have to unfreeze the credit, get the 40% off, then refreeze it. So that's just how it works. It is tedious, but it does prevent anybody else from getting credit in your name. And also, if you have been scammed or know somebody that has, please report it. No, we're not going to fly over to some other country and arrest these people, but it helps our federal government zone in on what's going on to try to stop some of that. They do set up bigger operations to get some of those bigger organizations And it also helps them to come up with ways to keep us a little bit safer. It's why you see some of the stuff on the phones now with, spam likely, block. And if you're getting a lot of those phone calls, talk to your provider about what apps are safe to kind of curb some of that. Or if it's you've been in contact with scammers too often and now those phone calls are inundating, you might have to change your number, which I know a lot of people are not a fan of, but that might be something that you have to do. If you report to the FBI and you sent them wire transfer, if you realize that it was a scam right after that wire transfer or the money being sent in the mail, local law enforcement and or the FBI may be able to stop that and get your money back. But it has to be caught right away. So I always say it's worth it to try. So the easiest way is to get on the internet to the FBI and then contacting your local law enforcement. And then if somebody has stolen your identity, then you want to go to identitytheft.com. That's a great website. It has all kinds of different tricks and things for you to do to kind of make sure that you're safe. And last but not least, AARP has a wonderful section called Elder Watch, and they are top notch in knowing all the latest scams, and you will talk to a live person. And if you have been scammed and are struggling dealing with some of the trauma and the stress, they also have support groups. So a great organization if this has happened to you or somebody that you know. And last but not least, I'm again Lynn Lowe, and I'm the Senior Resource Navigator for the City and County of Denver. And so if you have questions about something that you may have experienced and are unsure, or if you're wondering how to put things on private or how to manage your email, please do not hesitate to reach out. I would love to help you. And any other things that come to your mind, or if you're dealing with some of the loss and you need other resources, that's what I'm here for. Thank you, everybody.